Hello, and welcome to the H in HR podcast, where people discuss the most important aspect of human resources, the human aspect. Now, here is your host, Ricky Baez.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know by that sound what kind of episode this is going to be, this is the veteran episode of the H and HR podcast, folks, and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate it. It has been a while since we've been on. It's been a busy year, which is a good thing. It's been a political year. I'm glad that's over with. And there's just been a lot of things going on in the HR world that's keeping a lot of HR professionals very, very busy. But now we're back in the studio and we have a great show for you today. This is one of my favorite times of year because, you got October just finished, November. That's when the holiday starts kicking off. And it's also the birthday of the United States Marine Corps. That's right, folks. November 10th, 1775. This Marine Corps was born in a bar, out of all places. Go figure. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to have a great conversation with one of the best executive coaches out there and leadership coaches out there. His name is Dr. Edwin Mouriño-Ruiz. He is the president and founder of an organization called the Human Intelligent Workplace. Here's what they do. This is an organization that is focused on helping other businesses and organizations enable a healthy work environment through effective leadership and behavior practices. Now, as soon as we're talking about leadership and we're talking about how to influence people, this is the topic that really gets me going. So his name is Dr. Edwin Mouriño-Ruiz. He is a veteran of the United States Air Force. He spent 10 years in the Air Force. Then he decided to get out and use the GI Bill, which is what a lot of business professionals do today, right? They go into the military, they learn all the skills they possibly can, and then they decide to take a different route and then use the GI Bill benefits for education to actually establish themselves as a leading authority in leadership, HR, whatever they dedicate their lives to. So we had a great conversation about the military, his 10 years and in the Air Force, my 10 years in the Marine Corps, and how different leadership has been from the time we were in the military to now going into the civilian world, which is what a lot of veterans are experiencing these days. They're going from the military world to the civilian world, and they're having to adjust quite a bit. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Edwin Mouriño-Ruiz. Check it out. Dr. Edwin Mouriño. How the heck are you, sir?
It is Friday. I can't complain. It's good, and it's great to be here for celebrating what soon will be Veterans Day.
That's right. We are recording this on the Friday before Veterans Day, but between this episode and Veterans Day, there's one important date, which I don't know if you know about this, but this is happening on Sunday, November 10th. And now that I said that date for everybody out there who served in the Marine Corps, which that's where I served 4 years in the Marine Corps from 1995 to 1999. This Sunday is the birthday of the Marine Corps, November 10th, 1775. So,
wow.
We're going to celebrate this weekend.
Semper Fi, my friend.
Yeah, Semper Fi, that's right. So this is the veteran episode, and what better way to kick off this episode than two veterans talking about, how we can help veterans pretty much in the business world. So why don't you tell everybody about just a little bit about your military background?
Yeah, so I was in the service. I was in the Air Force for about 10 years. I joined in Puerto Rico. And my last few years is what kind of set the stage for me to do what I ended up doing in the civilian world for pretty much my whole career. I did leadership development. I was a social actions technician trained here at Patrick Air Force Base, one of the most extensive schools in the country. When it comes to that topic, it's a Department of Defense school. And so that really sort of set the jumping stage for me to eventually get into the civilian world and continue to do what I was doing already in the Air Force.
Nice. Okay. Well, I mean, I was a little bit different route because I went into communications. I was a field radio operator, and then they put me into an artillery unit, right? And they put me into that artillery unit, and man, it was fast paced. I was in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. If you've been there, anybody has been to Camp Lejeune, it is nothing to write home about. There's nothing there. The the city, which is in Jacksonville, North Carolina, the city in which the base is in is smaller than the actual base itself, which is
Wow.
weird. Which is weird. No, I did that, and 4 years I got out and decided to use the GI Bill and go into human resources, which kind of cross paths with what you're doing as far as leadership coaching, right?
Yeah, because I'm like you. I took advantage of it while I was in the service and went to college, went to school at night, and they had a program called Bootstrap where I could go during the day for a year type of thing. So I got my education while I was in and took advantage of it. And then eventually when I ended up with Lockheed Martin, they ended up paying for my doctorate. So
Oh,
wherever
nice.
I was, I took advantage of those things. And I can relate to your, not to Camp Lejeune, but when I was in Puerto Rico and I signed up to join, I signed up the dream sheet and I asked for Florida, California, Hawaii. So they sent me to Oklahoma.
I mean, right? I mean, it tracks, right? It tracks. Whatever you want in the military, don't ask for it directly because they'll give you the exact opposite. Using that same rationale, if you want something, tell the military you want the exact opposite, and then you'll get it, right?
There you go. There you
So
go.
so right now you're a college so you're a college professor. You own your own business. You are an executive coach. What made you take that route? So after 10 years in the Air Force, what made you come to the civilian world and then focus on executive coaching?
So I was doing leadership development. I was training in the First Sergeant's Academy and so forth, in the NCO prep and leadership schools in the
Yeah.
service. And when I transitioned out, I continued in that route and continued to do leadership development in the civilian world ever since then. And when I eventually got my PhD, since I was doing so much leadership development work and talking about human capital issues and so forth, that's what also gave me the leg up. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take what I've had from corporate America and the military, and I'm going to take it into the college, into the classroom. And that's what I did. And so now I part-time teach in universities, and continue to write about the topics that we're going to talk about, all of that kind of stuff. And to your point, do executive coaching, and hopefully here with our conversation here, it's a way to pay it forward to our brothers and sisters coming out of the military and learn, because I got out of the military way before you did. Actually, I call it BI, before internet, type of thing. And
Got it.
so I had to, it was interesting, the challenges I had to go through. But it's sad that I see still some of those challenges today for our brothers and
Yeah.
sisters coming out of the military, transitioning into the civilian world.
You know what? And I'm with you 100% there, Edwin, because I look, I'm glad to see what the government does for its vets, but they can do so much more. And personally, I don't believe that they're doing the best they possibly can to help vets transition from military life to civilian life, especially now 4 years. All right, fine. You did it for 4 years. You're gonna have a transition. But what if you spend 20, 25, 30 years living a certain way, leading a certain way, and now you have to be a civilian? So, from your practice, Edwin, how do you help veterans transition mentally from that military life into civilian life?
So I'm going to share some stories with them, with the audience, but and that one particular question, I'm going to address it at the end. But
Okay,
before we get there, I want to share with them some takeaways from my military experience, the environment that they're walking into, the workplace today, when they're transitioning from the military to civilian world, and then lastly end up with some considerations, and that's where I'm going to answer specific your question. So, for
gotcha.
example, here's some takeaways I had. For me, the military, and I was in 10 years and it was in my 20s. So to me, that was a foundational chapter of what I was going to be doing in the workplace. That sort of set the stage for me. That was one thing. Secondly, it gave me a broader exposure to teamwork and diversity than I would have ever have experienced in the civilian world. I mean, just remember back, it could be a nightmare or a dream when you first got to basic training. I mean, you're meeting people from all walks of life, and you could be from the same city, but again, pretty doggone diverse, and how to do teamwork and so forth. So they they gave us that foundationally. The third piece was, and this one I learned when I got out, was leadership development. Remember, I started doing a lot of leadership development work. And so I thought I'm getting out into the civilian world, and that's going to be progressive and really out there, cutting edge and so forth. What I learned was in the military world, you didn't move into your next rank till you went through training first, whatever leadership training, NCO prep, leadership, PME, or professional military education. Same thing with first sergeants, all of that kind of stuff. In the civilian world, it's different. You and I are both in the HR world. You're the best HR person. You're the next manager. And then somewhere down the road, we'll train you. That's what I learned was the complete opposite, which was crazy. And then the last part I wanted to share with the audience is you will be successful in your transition to the civilian sector because a lot of us have also done it. And I'll give you a little story to make that point.
Yeah.
I was sharing with you yesterday about a sergeant major, 30 years in the Marines. And I worked in the utility world. Two things happened to me there. We were helping these leaders become more participative leaders than autocratic leaders. And I remember talking with this sergeant major after 30 years, and he said, you know, the biggest shift I had to make, he said after, and he had a deep voice. So when he spoke, you felt like he was barking orders out at you. And he said, but today I work in a nuclear facility where basically I'm over 30 females. That's the staff that I manage. So you don't think I had to make a mental shift? I learned the fundamentals, but I can't come over here and bark orders out. I had to do different things. So that was completely different. The other thing I learned in that environment, I remember asking all these managers who had been in the industry for a long time, that at the time they could have been my father, their age-wise. And I said, so why are we going to this participative style of management? And they said, well, we don't want to be like the military and autocratic. And so I asked them, so how many of you have been in the military? Not one. So I'm like, so where did you learn this type of thing? So those are some takeaways I have from my experience, that you have more autocratic style management sometimes in the civilian world than you have in the military.
So that now that's for the veteran. That's for that veteran who's transitioning from military life, especially that 30-year sergeant major. Because, Sergeant Major in the Marine Corps, man, for them to get to that rank, because the Marine Corps is not as big as people think it is. I believe last I checked, it was 280,000 people in the Marine Corps, whereas the Army, I think it's 1.1 million, something like that, right? So it's a much smaller outfit, which makes it more difficult to get to those top ranks. So now that's from the veteran side. But you and I both work with a lot of business leaders, exactly how you said that they've never been in the military. What advice do you have to that business leader to make a veteran transition just as easy as anybody else is coming from military life to civilian life? What can a leader do to make that transition smooth?
One, they need to adapt sort of a coaching mindset and mentality, because today's workplace is different. The psychology of today's workforce has dramatically shifted. The pandemic really pushed the envelope on that. So, for example, things people need to be aware of, we need to ensure that we create a human-centered organization. What do I mean by that and why? First of all, people are looking for autonomy, purpose, and mastery. They're looking for happiness. They're looking to be engaged. They're looking to be treated with respect and dignity. They're looking to be listened to and empathy. All skill sets that military learned, but if you forgot it and you're in the civilian world, that needs to shift and change. The other thing is this, work has become the 5th cause of death due to stress. That's from a book called Dying for a Paycheck.
5th cause of death?
Yes. And managers are experiencing that even more so. As a matter of fact, Gen Z is saying, you know what? I don't want to be in a manager role. I see what's happening to Ricky and I don't want that role type of thing. So managers need to understand, how do I create a good environment? Not just manage, but how do I demonstrate leadership and create that better approach in the organization? Because we have learned through research, MIT, Harvard, and so forth has told us when we have happy employees, they're going to be 2 times less likely to be sick. They're going to be more productive. They're going to be more loyal. They're going to be more creative, all of those kinds of things. And last, there was an interesting study that was done. They were asking, what are you looking for in your next employer? They asked 200,000 people worldwide. This is from a TED Talk, 2030 Workforce Crisis, which is talking about the aging workforce. And what they found out was, they said, the number one thing we want is a thank you. We want to be appreciated. By the way, pay was number 8 in that.
Wow.
worldwide study. So again, those are the things that those that are in the civilian world need to come to grips with if they haven't already. And those transitioning out into the civilian world need to understand that now, need to understand that's what's happening out there, recognizing not all organizations are there, but that's what the workforce is changing. And one of the great things for particularly that veteran getting out, there's a hellacious skill shortage out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's big. And so, and the biggest interesting thing about that, so yeah, AI, they're talking about 40% to reskill up in AI, but the biggest demands to make sure that people have skills going forward is problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, empathy, and listening. All the interpersonal skills that all you veterans out there learned in the civilian world, you had to learn. So you're bringing that bailiwick, that set of experiences with you. That's important for you to be able to demonstrate it and show it. Really show it off, because trust me, there's a big need out here. You and I know, working with clients out there, that there's a big void out there type of thing.
So let's take a deep dive into that, because I'm fascinated with people's perception of leadership at the beginning of their career and what it is now. Because and here's where I'm firing from. I have seen situations where leaders, actually before they go into a leadership position, they start working for X company, they stay there, they're loyal, they're there for a long time. They grow up in their career in that company, and they see leadership from the bottom up radically different to what they're seeing now 30 years later from the top bottom, right? So I guess my question is, how do you get a leader or a head of a business to shift their mindset? Because what they thought was the right skills to lead an organization, that was the skills 30 years ago, but now you need different skills now. How do you shift that mindset?
Well, that's where, and for some, it's usually they need an executive coach, because there's that book out there that says, what got you here is not going to get you there, type of thing. And so they need to step back and really reflect and think about, okay, where am I today? And how can I create, if human-centered and human intelligent organizations are going to be an important thing going forward, in the era of AI and all this psychological shift that's happening with the workforce, how can I create an environment around that? What do I need to do? But first, I need to get in touch with myself. What am I doing right? Yes, I have. As a matter of fact, if you've been in the workforce for 30 years, then you've learned some of those skill sets along the way. And so how do you demonstrate those things? How do you really put them to use? And how do you coach others, particularly upcoming leaders, or those transitioning particularly from the military into the civilian world, saying, you're not here to bark orders, you're here to really ensure that you help the group become a team at the end of the day. So you need to make sure that you're creating psychological safety. You need to ensure that you're creating an inclusive workplace, because when you're excluded from a call, a meeting, or anything, it usually feels like pain. You're upset. You're wondering, why do they exclude me from that? And what we have found out is only 8% of leaders are effective listeners. Listen to that number. Only 8%. A study found in the book, The Mind of the Leader, they found that only 8% of leaders are effective listeners and communicators. Wow. Now, I know those listeners out there saying, that's all me. Well, it can't be all you, because it statistically doesn't add up. It's only 8% of you. So are you really one of those? What would your workforce say at the end of the day? So listening is key, and it's listening to understand, not to respond.
Here we go.
Empathy is a core competency out there, and compassionate managers. And by empathy is, I understand, Ricky, your situation. Compassion is, how can I help? When you do that, that's either go that route or go the other route where, work is the fifth cause of death, and you have toxic workplace organizations, and there's low trust in leadership, those kinds of things. So if you do it right, it can lead to organizational effectiveness, which is really, at the end of the day, what you're there for, to try to do that.
It's you still baffle. So you baffle me with that number about work being the fifth, right? Yes. Fifth, you said, cause of death, which is insane. And I'm also looking at some information you gave me yesterday. Workplace problems, 62% not engaged. It's a Gallup poll where trust is low. 62% not engaged. I'm assuming you mean leaders or employees.
Employers, and by the way, in global, it's even worse.
Wow.
So, and the trust is low on leaders. They don't trust leaders, which to me, they don't trust managers, because I don't like using ineffective leaders in the same sentence. You can't be a leader if you're ineffective. Then you're just demonstrating maybe management, but not necessarily leadership. at the end of the day. As a matter of fact, I have taught many classes and leadership workshops over the years. There's a boatload of managers out there. There's very less leaders out there at the end of the day. So how do you balance those two and become really a true effective leader? Because a true effective leader, that means I trust you. That means I feel psychologically safe around you. That means I can bring up an idea as dumb as I may think it is, because innovation and creativity is important for organizations to reinvent themselves. Just ask Blockbuster, who's no longer around.
Yeah.
Or Circuit City, who's no longer around.
You saw what happened to them, right?
Yeah.
They didn't want to evolve, and then look what happened. And evolving is the thing. That's the key, right? You have to be willing to evolve with the workforce. You have to be willing to evolve with what the workforce is looking for. And this is something that I talk to my students all the time, Edwin, because it's the United States is the only country that I know of that labels generations, right? You got your fundamentalists, you have your Gen X, your Gen Z, you got your baby boomers, and I don't know any other country in the world that does that, right? But I find it fascinating here because once you label it, you can identify it, and you can identify different traits that would trigger you. I don't know if trigger is the right word. That as a leader, it would flip a switch like, oh, this is how I have to respond to how this person is talking. And the reason I'm bringing that up, Edwin, is because I've been doing this for 22 years, right? And the one thing people ask me is, what's the next big thing, Ricky? What is the next big a big generation? And the question, I mean, the answer is I don't know, right? Because Gen X, baby boomers, right? That environment created an environment to where Gen X is able to succeed, and then Gen X environment created that environment for the millennials. I guess what I'm trying to ask here is, and I know I asked it earlier, that shift, how are you flexible? How can you be flexible enough to understand that the skill set that got you, whether in the military or in the civilian world, 30 years into your career, may not be the same skill set that's going to get you across that next obstacle 5 more years into the future. So I guess my question is, and I think I'm answering it as I'm blabbing along here, how do you get that flexibility? How do you make sure you exercise that flexibility as a leader without looking incompetent? I don't know if that makes sense, because if you shift your mind a lot, you look incompetent to a lot of people. So how do you do that confidently?
So you may not even look incompetent to people because, number one, leadership has been aligned with learning. So
Yeah.
you constantly have to be learning. That's one. So here I'm going to contradict myself, but this is the reality I've seen. The more things change, the more they remain the same. And I'll give you an example. A lifetime ago, when I was in the service, I was teaching about communication skills.
Yeah.
What are we teaching about today? I just said 8% of leaders are poor listeners and communicators.
8%.
This is a recent study. So the more things change, the more they remain the same. That's one. Two, the point you talked about the different generations, yes, they're kind of highlighted and they've got supposedly categories of each. But there's research that's coming out and it's challenging that, saying, are they really that different, or are they just different stages of their life and their career? And that's what I think is really happening. I love it when baby boomers tell me, you know what, these young kids, they're not loyal. They want to be president next year. I don't know what to do. I don't know what about them. And I said, and my question back to them was, so who raised them?
Boom.
And all of a sudden they're, well, no, I'm not talking about my kids. And I
Of
said, you
course
know
not.
what? The same stereotypes you have about them, they have about you. You're not tech savvy. You're too expensive. All of this kind of stuff, which is not true, by the way. Research doesn't support any of that. So the point, a long answer to your question is, one, the more things change, the more they remain the same. The people skills are the people skills are the people skills anywhere on the
That's true.
planet. I've talked in China, I've talked in Europe, I've talked in Canada, and it's always interesting how people see it from their point of view. And I'll give you a quick example of that. I was talking to an executive group up in Canada. I had the CEO right in front of me and Hall, his directs in front of me, and I asked them, so on a 1 to 5 scale, rate yourself how an effective leader you are. And I said, okay, secondly, rate the management across the organization on a 1 to 5. And I third, Thirdly, how do you think your workforce would rate management across the organization 1 to 5? And then I did the averages. I asked them to give me the numbers, did the averages. So when they rated themselves personally, they were about 4.4, if I remember correctly. When I asked, okay, what about the management? They were about 3.8. When I asked them, how will the employees rate the management? They were about 3.3. So
Wow.
basically, they were saying, I'm okay. They're a little broken, and they definitely think they're broken at the end of the day. And so it's interesting that I saw that. I thought, and you know what? That's no different. I keep seeing it in different places with research and so forth going on. But I saw it in living color in this session when I asked them that, and they're driving the ship. They're driving the
Yeah.
Titanic at the end of the
They're
day.
at the helm. Yeah.
This is the executive team at the end of the day. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, things change, but not really. And as much as we talk about different generations, they're just in different places. But at the end of the day, what we find from a lot of things, and even you don't need research on this, is anecdotal. We want respect. We want to be listened to. We want to be engaged. We want to be included. We want to have a happy place. Why would we want to have work be the fifth cause of death at the end of the day?
That
But
number's still crazy.
yeah.
It's crazy. So I'm looking at some information you sent me. So what research tells us, a happy employee, 2 times less likely to be sick, 6 times less likely to be absent, 9 times more loyal, 31% more productive, and 55% more creative. This is from MIT and Harvard. Those are some daunting numbers there, right? It's so 2 times less likely to be sick. Now, so hold on. So is there a correlation between being happy? So is there a correlation between being happy at work and being healthy, or being happy at work and, I guess, toughing out more illnesses and not calling out more at work? So is it you develop more tough skin, or are you just healthier?
When you're happy?
Yeah.
No, when you're happy, I mean, neurologically, there's a boatload of research out there, neuroscience and neural leadership, and I've been talking about that for some time. The brain's primary role is to survive at the end of the day. Now, you and I don't get up in the morning thinking I have to survive, because that's running unconsciously.
Yeah.
But the moment you get insulted, boom, you get into a
That's true.
defensive.
Yeah.
So when you're happy, there's a bunch of things happening in your brain that you just feel healthier. You just feel better. All you have to do is think about, think about this. On Fridays, what are you thinking about? The weekend.
A weekend. Yeah.
So, and you're thinking, okay, what do I got to do? I'm looking forward to that kind of stuff. On Sundays, what are you thinking about? Work.
Monday.
Yeah, right. And so when you're thinking about work, what are you thinking about in that work? Because I read something on LinkedIn that said the way people feel on Sunday tells you
Yep.
all you need to know about your organizational culture. So if I'm feeling pretty excited, hey, I work for Ricky, he's a good guy, he treats me with respect, dignity, and so forth. If I have a personal problem, he checks with me and go, hey, is there something going on? Again, listening, empathy, and compassion.
Yeah.
And so when he does those things, and I say, look, man, I've got a problem at home, my wife is sick, whatever, you need some time off, whatever it is that we come to work with, then I feel like, you know what, he's looking out for me. Because he knows that if I have a problem at home, I'm not going to be that productive here.
Yeah.
That's going to be in my head. And if I have a problem here, I'm going to take it home.
You got that right. You got that right.
So that's I think the more you create a better engaged workforce through having people be more happy, more engaged, and that kind of stuff, you're just going to impact the bottom line in a positive way.
So continuing on on that train, you also say here that job preferences of 200,000 job seekers. Number 1, appreciation for your work. I mean, that goes without saying. Number 2, good relationship with colleagues. Let me pause there real quick, right? Because I think that's big. That is huge right there. There's a lot of people on social media today putting out content, TikTok and YouTube and everything, saying that work is not a place for you to make friends. It's a place for you to make money and then go home. I have an opinion on that, but I want your opinion to see what do you think about that statement? No relationships at work, just go make your money and go home.
Well, I've heard that in some places, but the research doesn't support that. The research says, because you think about it, you got to work with people. There's an old saying I came across that said, everybody lights up a room. Some when they walk in, others when they walk out. Which are you?
I love it.
And so, but think about it, at a time when you were teamed up with an individual to work with, and you thought he might or she might be the brightest one for this, but she is difficult or he is difficult to work with. What did that do? That put you on a defensive mode. That didn't necessarily make you happy. Your guard is up, all that kind of stuff. So I hear what they say that you're there to make the money and get out, but you spend the most of your adult life at work.
There it is. There
So
and Edwin, let me tell that one. The reason I'm biting on that one is because that one is the one that gets under my skin the most because I'm like, you're spending more than 1/3 of your day at work. Okay, so let's say you spend at least 10 hours there, right? So how much more time do you have when you get home, right? Because you don't get home to do whatever you want. You now have other responsibilities, whether it's karate practice, school, whatever the case may be, and then you handle that, and then sleep is what suffers. But continuing down that list, you also put good work-life balance, right? Which that's very important. And of course, to me, work-life balance, it depends on how you see work, right? Because I check emails on Saturdays, I check emails on Sundays. Other people may think that's not good work-life balance, but to me, it brings me peace because I'm on top of things, right? And it brings me a much calmer Monday. So to me, if I don't check my emails on Saturdays and Sundays, it does not create a good balance for me for the week, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, even that term is outdated. Now, granted, this was done 10 years ago, this TED
Yeah.
Talk, but the term now is work-life integration. And that came front and center during the pandemic because you and I were working from home, the dog barked, the baby was crying, whatever the issue was, the UPS arrived, the Amazon arrived, whatever it was, and so we had to integrate it. So work-life integration is the more progressive and more contemporary construct out there today versus work-life balance because we didn't do it well anyway. So it's still used a lot, but really work-life integration is the one that's really important out there nowadays.
So I got to change that word, right? So balance to integration, because again, I never saw the issue if you love what you get to do. To me, work
Right.
life balance becomes an issue if you hate your job, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, number four, which I think is crucial, good relationship with your supervisor, which to me, and I tell this to all my students whenever somebody tells me that old saying is not, in order for you to get promoted or get that job, it's not what you know, is who you know. And I tell people that's wrong, right? It really is who likes you, right? Because now you don't have to kiss butt, but if you're liked and they like you, you got good chemistry. I mean, just think about it. If you was in charge, if you're a leader out there right now and you're interviewing people, you got two people that you can pick from, right? One person has 5 PhDs, all of the credentials you're looking for, above and beyond, but they're an a-hole, right? And then you have person B who's got the minimum qualifications but gets along with everybody. Who are you going to put in your team, right? Person B, not person A, because person A is going to disrupt whatever chemistry the team had. So I guess from my perspective, I think this is one that people really need to pay attention to is you got to have a good relationship with your supervisor because that can really make or break your environment at work, right?
Yes, and I would also put more weight on the supervisor. And I'll tell you what, it's important to have that relationship with your supervisor. I hear you, but you sometimes you're in a no-win situation because you're working for that one a-hole
Yeah.
that you talked about earlier. But to the managers, to any leaders out there, I've been using this lately. Never in your life did you ever think that when you stepped into a managerial role, you would become a celebrity, a quasi-psychologist, sociologist, and anthropologist. Celebrity, why? Because the spotlight is on you, Mr. Miss Manager. People are watching what you say and do. They're everything you say and do. Psychologist, why? Because you got your own stuff and going on in
Yeah.
your head. And then when I'm dealing with somebody else, they got their own stuff too. So that's one. Sociologist, because of team dynamics. I can go in an organization and different environments in each of the team in each of the departments because of team dynamics. And last, anthropologist, why? Because of organizational culture. How is the organizational culture there? And you get to create that, Mr. Miss Leader, in one form, fashion, or another. So yes, important to have a good relationship with your supervisor. That's what this study was saying. That's what they're looking for in the next employer. But at the same time, if you're spending the time and money to hire them, Mr. Miss Manager,
Mm,
make sure that you invest well and treat them well because turnover costs at a minimum 150%, and it goes up from there
that's
depending on
right.
the level and expertise of the individual. So yeah, that's an important thing at the end of the day.
It's to continue on with this tech talk on 2030 workforce crisis. I just read number one, job preferences for job seekers is appreciation of your work. Number two, good relationship with colleagues. Three, good work-life balance. Four, good relationship with supervisor. Skip five, skip six, skip seven. Number eight, attractive fixed salary. You said it earlier, right? That is number eight on the list. In talking to people today, right, is how they negotiate salaries left and right, and people leave because of salaries. That's almost hard to believe, right? Because when you do exit interviews, what people tell you is, the pay. You would think that's higher up on the list, but that's not the case according to the research, huh?
Yeah, I mean, they'll say the pay. First of all, people don't usually tell the real deal as to why
That's
they're
true.
leaving. I was
That's
just
true.
in a class last night teaching, and I had he's a business owner, and he had this one individual that was leaving, and he reached out to her and said, "Why are you leaving? Can I pay you more?" And she said, "No, your manager treats me with total disrespect. I am out of here."
Wow.
And she moved on. And he couldn't believe it because he's the owner of the business. So now he's trying to really get into the organization and find out. And I said, so your responsibility as the owner of that company is to figure out how do you get in there and make sure that your managers know that they're accountable and held and will be rewarded for the behaviors that you want, and in turn create the culture that you want in your organization. But most people won't say the cop-out excuse is I'm leaving for more pay.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, most people, there's research out there that says once you reach a certain, I'm sure you've heard this doing HR work, once you reach a certain level of pay is not an issue anymore. It's
Yeah,
not a
yeah, it's true.
I've tried to tell my undergrad students that, but they don't know it because they haven't had that experience. They
Yeah.
say, they pay me $200,000. I don't care what they do to me. I said, trust me, it'll feel like Sunday every day. You don't believe me? You don't have to. That's okay. But trust me, you're going to be stressed out, and you might even, there's a reason why sometimes there's violence in the workplace because
Yeah.
somebody is treated with, in a bad way.
You are so right about that, Edwin, because I've had so many leaders come back to me where they would have a conversation with their employee. Their employee says, "Hey, I'm going to resign," and the leader's like, "Hey, you know what? What if I pay you $10,000 more a year?" And this is the part where leaders need to listen. When the person says, "Well, I'm leaving for less money," what does that tell you, right? And when they come back to me, the leader says, "Hey, Ricky, we got to give them more." I'm like, "Hold up, you wasn't listening to what that person said. It's not a money issue. If they're getting paid $60,000 right now, they're going somewhere else to get paid 52, and your answer to keep them from leaving is to add $10,000 more to the salary. You're not listening to what they're saying. The issue they would rather take a $8,000 pay cut in a horrible environment for a better environment at work, right? So that says a lot. And you're right. When somebody says hey, they're going to pay me $250,000, $250,000 a year, they can do whatever they want. You're going to think that for 6 months. Once you get used to that money, then what?
Exactly.
What's the point of you coming home at 35 years old with a knot in your chest? And let me tell you, Edwin, when I worked at a large restaurant company as HR, that's exactly how I felt every time I came home. I
Yeah.
was in my early 30s, and I'm like, hey, do I really need to be in a situation where my chest is hurting? And I guess you're right. The fifth cause of death would be work. Wow.
Exactly. So that's the thing that
Wow.
managers, leaders, and organizations have to realize now. And by the way, this research I'm sharing with you, it's not just me making. There's is a litany of books and research and papers
Yeah.
out there that are being written, and you don't even need that though, because anecdotally, listen to what happened to you in that experience, and I'm sure every day you were thinking, is there somewhere else I can be?
Yeah.
Type
No,
of
I
thing.
was. I
and
was.
and eventually you did. So I that there's
Now,
the research and then there's the real life experience.
Now, conversely, the opposite way. I then worked to because I was laid off from that place, right? And I was happy because they gave me good severance. I was okay. Then I went to this other place. I'll mention it. It was Sears Home Improvement, right? And Sears, you know that it's if you look them up in the news, they're not doing good at all, right? But the home improvement side of the house was spot on. I got three things there, three things because that I never got anywhere else at the same time. I got a great boss, Lena. She was amazing. She was one of the best bosses I've ever had. I had an amazing team, which I went to dinner with last night. And I had amazing business partnerships. I've always had those, but never at the same time, right? And because of that, I thought I was going to be there for like maybe 6 months to a year. I spent 8 years there. 8 years getting paid 35% less than what I was at the other place, because exactly how you said, I'm in a place in my career where I can now pick and choose environment over salary. Right at the beginning of my career, I couldn't do that. Salary was more important. Now I can pick and choose where I get to play and live. And I'm trying to tell my students that at the same time, Edward. I'm like, guys, you need to focus on what your passion is, and you need to focus on what it is that makes you happy. Where on Sunday night you won't have those Sunday night scaries, right? So that said, because I know we are running out of time, what are a couple of things, Edwin, that you think the veteran population out there who's transitioning into the civilian world, or the leaders out there listening right now who are considering hiring veterans, what are some of the things that some takeaways they can take away right now that they can implement tomorrow?
So I'm going to talk to the veterans out there, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I'll connect it to the leaders.
Yeah.
I would say four things. To the veterans, as you're coming out, do your research. Research the organization, look at Glassdoor. Nowadays, you have Glassdoor. We didn't have that when I got out, type of thing. So you learn that. And also look at the industries, because for the same job you're going to do, some will pay more than others.
Mm.
So go find the industry. If you're going to have to go work for 40, 50 hours a week and one industry pays more, why not go get it? Now, that doesn't mean if it's not a healthy environment, that's a different issue. Remember, there's a major skill shortage out there. So keep that in mind. Secondly, I would ask you to consider is learn a second language. By that, I mean translate your military experience to the civilian world. If you've been over a team, a group of people, a squadron, whatever it is that you were over, then how do you translate to that I was over a project, I was over a multi-million-dollar operation, I was over people, had to motivate leadership, all the qualities, project management that I bring to the table. So learn that. Military speak to corporate speak. The third thing is know your skill sets. And particularly the people skill sets. Those are needed everywhere and anywhere. There's a shortage of that out there. And that is the interpersonal, the teaming, collaboration, follow through, leadership, all of those kinds of things are going to be needed. You heard already what's going on with leaders out there. Some of them, 8% only, are effective listeners. And lastly, your search, your interview process should be a two-way street. Engage in a dialogue. It shouldn't just be Ricky asking me questions. I need to ask him questions so you can describe to me the organizational culture here. Type of thing. And it should be a two-way street. Ask about the role, success, the person before you that was there, the organizational culture, all of those things. And for the leaders, know that those hiring people in the inside, knowing that you're bringing it's not just their military, and get those old movie tapes out of your headset. These people learn a lot of people skills, interpersonal skills, and so forth. And oh, by the way, some of them were up in the front line, so they had to deal with a lot of stress and things like that. So make sure that you're opening up the door and an opportunity to individuals that bring a vast breadth of experience and depth of experience. Tap into those, capitalize on them versus, well, they're military, they're going to fit into the organizational culture. What does that really mean? They would fit into organizational culture. That to me is a bias. And recognize your own biases too. The hiring leaders, recognize your biases. Of course, to everybody that's involved in that interview process, recognize our biases. Because remember this, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. See the world not as it is, but as we are. So that's what I would advise them to consider.
So one more question for you, because I know you have a book, right? And we're going to talk about that book where the audience can get that here in just a bit. What is the one thing you learned in your 10 years in the military that to this day, right now, you still use that skill set?
Listen to understand, not to respond. Not to say I get it always right.
Yeah.
Because once you get in the flux of things and emotions clock up, then all of a sudden we get dumbed down. Literally, the neuroscientists tell us that if you and I get into a conflict and a debate, we literally get dumbed down. Because this part of our brain actually goes dark, which is the executive function of our brain, the PFC, the prefrontal cortex. So I would say, listen and try to control your emotions, and remember also our own biases. We see the world not as it is, but as we are. is the things that till today I still remember. And I learned it then, and I still try to practice that today.
Now, you used to teach at Rollins College too, right? Because I teach at Rollins College, but you remember a professor by the name of Dr. Rick Bomble-J.
Yeah, communications guy.
Yeah, man, let me tell you, that class right there. That class, I learned a lot from that dude because he was intense, man, but he would put us together and really have difficult conversations. And he is the reason why I learned exactly what you said. You have to listen to understand and comprehend, not listen to respond. And I learned that in that class. If there's anything I learned in the Marine Corps that I still use today is and people give me kudos for this all the time. My insane patience. I have the patience of a saint, Edwin. Let me tell you, because you know how, and you know this, man. You know how many times we had to go to formation, right? 5 hours before we had to go anywhere, and we had this old saying, "Hurry up and wait." Hurry up, because that's all we did. So whenever I'm talking to somebody doing an investigation and I'm listening to what they're saying, you could tell that they're lying. You could tell they're just BS. And I'm just sitting there listening because I have the patience, all the patience in the world, right? And when other people are just about to explode, right? So that is the one thing that I took away that I still use today. And let me tell you, for anybody listening out there, it helps at home and at work.
Oh yeah,
It definitely helps at home, right?
oh definitely.
So your book, what's the name of your book?
So I got a couple of them. One I got out there that I co-edited, and we have different authors from different universities, is Leading Diversity in the 21st Century. And then the other one is The Perfect Human Capital Storm, which I've written my third one. And if you go out to my website, I actually got what I call an ebook 3.0, a condensed version of it. I have
Okay.
a video out there, but I have an actual ebook. So if you want it, you can get it. But and that's talking about all the trends and the implications for organizations, leaders, and so forth going forward. Trends, the skill shortage I talked about, the psychology, the psychological workforce, the changing demographics, AI, and all of those things, and how organizations have to change. And oh, by the way, 66% of change efforts fail, as
Ugh.
much as organizations have to change. So that's what I write about in that book. And I still go out there and talk to organizations whenever they want to, just to say, so you're planning a strategy, you need to know the human capital trends that are happening
Yeah.
out there, because this is going to be imperative important to you. Type
So
of thing.
I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the video, but can you say the website that way people know where to go? But I'm still gonna put it on the text on the YouTube video. What's the
Yeah,
website?
it's this thing right behind me, Human Intelligent Workplace, right above me.
Got it. I see it. So humanintelligentworkplace.com.
Yeah, yeah.
Got you. I'll put it on there. And is that how people can reach you if they want to know
Yeah,
more
and
about your services?
yeah, either
Perfect.
that or on LinkedIn too, they can connect. But out there in my Human Intelligent Workplace, I have blogs and articles and so forth and videos that they're welcome to look at. And like I said, I have that ebook out there if you really want to get a copy of it. Just sign up and get that type of thing. But I want to make sure I don't miss this one as we come to finish. And that is for my veterans out there. Thank you for your service. We're celebrating it again. There's another group out there. I usually say thank you for your service, and that's to educators out there,
Yeah.
because especially in grade schools and high schools and so forth. I think high school is probably the toughest. I've never been an educator there, but we have it tough already in college, as you well know.
Yeah.
Type of thing. Graduate and undergraduate. But to our veterans out there,
Trust me, I know.
thank you for your service. I appreciate it. And Ricky, thank you for inviting me here.
No, thank you. This was an awesome conversation, and I got to get you to come back. This was great convo. Really appreciate it. I'm gonna put all of your information on there. That way, people can reach out to you. And folks, for everybody out there listening, it's I'm gonna echo what Edwin just said. For all the veterans out there, thank you very much for your service. Seriously, it's I know, especially at the time of this recording, it's been an insane political week. Actually, it's been an insane political year, right? And either way, regardless on who's in office, doesn't matter. It's you got people out there who willingly put on a uniform and write a blank check, right, for this country to cash. So anybody that does that willingly, hats off to you. I thank you for what you do, and thank you for your bravery. That said, folks, thank you very much. You have a good one. Good night.
Have a good one. Thank you.
All right, folks, that is our show. If you want to get a hold of Dr. Edwin Mouriño, go to humanintelligentworkplace.com. I'm going to place it on here, and I'm also going to have it on the show notes. Again, that is humanintelligentworkplace.com, and you can also find him on LinkedIn. I will have the link for LinkedIn in the show notes as well. So, folks, That is our show for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you have an amazing November and an even better Christmas. Have a good one. Good night.